Go.
Hi, welcome to the Center for Sacramento History. My name is Nicholas Piontek. I'm one of our newest archivists here, and today I'm going to talk to you about our film collection. If you have any questions while I'm speaking, feel free to put them in the chat, and my colleague Kim, who's holding the phone, will read them out to me. So to start with, we're in the center's office. We'll go into the back and show you where our film is, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the collection. So the collection primarily is based on the KCRA and KOVR news film footage, which comes from about 1957 to 1982 in the greater Sacramento region. We have a considerable amount of important and normal daily activities that are captured on film. So we have Governor Reagan considerably shown, along with other Golden State Killer footage, that's been especially popular recently, given the HBO documentary, which actually licensed a lot of our footage. So we're going to walk back this way. We have mobile storage here on my right, and the film is down here. And I'll talk a little bit about how it's stored. When we inherited the film from the donating channels, they brought to us in a lot of metal canisters. And for preservation, that's not ideal. The metal becomes corrosive, especially if it's warm, and that leads to a bit of a degradation. I've got a couple examples here I'll show you as we get into the film lab how the film degrades. So this is predominant KCRA holdings. You can see how this entire side of the aisle is all KCRA footage. And these are the metal tins that the footage came in. Now, as we move to preserve the footage, we actually switch it from metal tins to these 3D printed plastic tins. It's made by the Tuscan Corporation, and you can see that the film now is on a plastic base instead of being on metal, which is much better for it long-term, especially as we talk about putting it into cold storage. This container also breathes a little bit, so that if the film does start to off-gas as it degrades, it doesn't sit in its own gas and further its own degradation. So each one of these canisters represents one day's news film. Ideally, we have the date on each one, and that shows us exactly what happened on that day as it appeared on the network. Each one of these boxes has some more dates in it, so you can see we have a considerable amount of dates covered. And so the challenge for us is making sure that everything is described accurately online. So if you're interested in looking for the footage and finding something in particular, ideally we can point you in the right direction. Right now we do not have much of this digitized. If you go to our website, you can find us on YouTube and the Internet Archive. You can see what we do have digitized, but our goal, of course, is to get all of this online for you to be able to review and look up interesting things that happen around the area on these dates. Let me take you to the next aisle here, and I can show you the KOVR footage. Now, the room we're in right now is fairly cool. Ideally, it's not very humid, which is terrific. So we're stopping the film from degrading any further. But the film may have already degraded to a certain extent before we even receive it, especially due to heat and humidity. Those are pretty much the worst things for film. And as the film starts to degrade, it releases acetic acid, which degrades the image and actually makes the film brittle. So if you think about film, it's usually pretty pliant, and when we spool it, it runs pretty well. The issue is some of our film actually will snap if it's too brittle. Putting it back together can be a little dangerous. So ideally what we're working on is we're going to move some of the stuff that's on the other side of the room, kind of back here, and we're going to build a cold storage room in here, which will keep the temperature a little bit above freezing, and that will then keep the film from getting any degrading any further. Now, before we put the film in, sort of take a started at the end of the film lab, we're going to take and digitize all the film. So once the film's digitized, we'll have that permanently available, and we won't have to handle the film anymore. The film can stay cool, safe, and it will keep controlled. Now, this aisle, we have more KCRA footage. And I believe in the back we have a little bit more KOVR. These boxes are a little bit different. And you can see on this specific date, different stories from that date. You see.
Speak louder, someone asks.
Oh, sure. Sorry about that. I'll speak up a bit. So what's interesting about this one, you can see here, you can see these little bits of different color. That's film leader. So this one, all those stories that I pointed out, those were all different little pieces of film on their own, and this has all been spooled together, so it's all on one date. Occasionally they come out and they're not all spooled together, and we have to do that to put it together for one date. But this one's fairly stable, plastic core, cardboard box. So let's walk back here a little bit too. All of these are dated and numbered, so we have a nice sense of order with them, and we can look at all the stories. Now, one of the really neat things we have too are these KCRA specials. And this is where KCRA sent news reporters and camera crews really around the world. We have some very neat ones online of KCRA staff going to Afghanistan during their war with the Soviet Union, and actually going back to Vietnam with a veteran from Sacramento and talking about his experience fighting in Vietnam and seeing the country about 10 years after he fought there. So these are a really incredible trove of information, which, even though they're not necessarily about the Sacramento region, really teach us a lot about history and the globe at the time they were shot. Back here on this side, we have a lot more diverse topics that aren't necessarily related to the specific dates. What's really neat with some of these is we have different sporting events around the area, and sort of different themes. These might have made it onto a specific show. They may not have, but they're kind of really neat cans just to look at, and when we're digitizing, it's fun to come back here and take a look and see what we have, different dates. There's a Macy's parade, a lot of really neat Olympic footage back here as well. Something that I'm pretty curious on is we do also have a lot of vintage football footage. I do have to check on the copyright to show that. But it's just really amazing. There's just so many different aspects of the local area that we've got. Arthur Ashe, for instance. NFL Raiders footage. The Camellia Bowl, which I believe was in the Bay Area. So just, yeah, a lot of really diverse footage that was shot by KCRA, which we're really grateful to have, because it sort of fills out the collection besides just local news stories. So, up here as well, we also have commercials that were shot for KCRA. They're perhaps at the moment not our highest priority to digitize, but they're a really interesting snapshot of what commercial ventures occurred in the area, and especially the history of how just how advertising was done, which I think is kind of a neat thing to see over time, especially now that we have the internet and footage and advertisements persist. It's really amazing to see all of this and see how it's changed. But we have quite a bit of work to do digitizing all of this before we even get to that point. I'm going to take you back to the film lab now, which is where we... Yes.
We have a question from Olivia. She wants to know about the jail tour footage. Do you know about this jail footage?
I don't.
I don't either.
Where did you see the footage, Olivia?
Yeah, Olivia, tell us. Well, we'll see what Olivia says.
We'll take a look for it.
Yeah, I don't know that either.
Yeah, I think, I assume it's a KCRA footage. They really did a lot of neat stuff around the area.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to archive.org and you look up Center for Sacramento History, we have some of the footage that's already been digitized there. There's a couple really neat videos about Sacramento shot by KCRA, almost as promos. So they have a neat one where they spend the entire day in Old Sacramento. They go to restaurants, they walk around, and they see what you can do, and it's pretty neat. It's kind of cute to see how some parts of it have changed and some parts haven't. We also have a few videos made by the Tourism Bureau. I believe they're from like kind of the early 90s, but they're really neat because the graphics are very 90s, the clothes are very 90s. So it's cool to see sort of how the city's changed and how our perception of it's changed, and what buildings are still there and what buildings aren't. So, take you back to the film lab, which is where...
Oh.
Yes.
Olivia said you walked right by it before the sports stuff.
Oh.
Which one of these many cans?
Jail tour.
We'll get back to you on that, Olivia.
Yeah. I'll come back here and see if I can dig that up. But that's sort of the fun part of this.
Yeah.
Just whenever I'm trying to find something to digitize, just trying to find something and see back here what we have.
Oh, Vacaville Prison?
Was that it?
Wait, where'd it go?
Oh, rats. Oh, I will look for that, Olivia. Huh. Which one of the things I find really fun is we have a few of these old pig bowl footage, which was the Sacramento City Police Department against the Sacramento County Sheriffs in a football game every year.
All right, we'll look for it,
Okay.
Olivia, after this.
We'll dig for it. So the film room we have in the back, it's a little bit cooler for us. We've got a nice wall-mounted air conditioner, but that's where we'll drag this footage, splice it together into one reel, and then digitize it. So for a long time, the center was using really what was actually a normal film projector, and I'll show it to you. It's really neat. It's a normal film projector, but instead of projecting, it actually has a camera capture, and I'll show you how that one works. But recently, we've been able to digitize a lot more footage, especially with the Gold State Killer trial. We've been able to license footage. The licensing helps us pay for the new film scanner we have. In fact, both of these pallets are those blue film canisters because we can't put any of the metal canisters into our cold storage facility. So at some point, we're going to take them all out, relabel them, repackage them, and then we'll rehouse them in the cold storage, which will be a lot safer for them long term. Now, if you visit our website or you go to the Online Archive of California, you can see our finding aids. So if you look up KCRA, that's in 3 finding aids, and the KOVR footage is in 1. Now, the finding aids usually will have a date and some very just bland information, very simple. This is the KOVR dailies. This is what we inherited from them with the donation. It's actually a card catalog, and then each day, now when I get it out of order, this has a date when it was shot, and then it's just got that little blurb. And that's all we'll end up having for it. So it really helps to try to explain what was shot that day, but also it's a little bland. So we try to figure out what we have and write it up a little bit more. But this is what we go through. We take all of this information and put it online to help people find what the footage looks like. So this is the film room. You can see we have just a lot of footage sitting around, a lot of files that we inherited from KCRA and KOVR about what's on the footage. But the exciting part really sort of starts here with the film splicer. So if we take a bunch of daily footage that we know was shot on a specific date and aired, we'll take all the little bits of film clips and we'll spool it together. We use this tape to tape the film together so that it all runs smoothly. And we have leader. We use white because it very obviously delineates between each episode, or each segment, excuse me. So this is our old scanner right here. You can see it looks pretty much like a normal projector, except this part is connected to the computer. So I'll turn it on. This was some footage from the US Navy. And what I want to highlight with this too, besides the fact that it's really cool footage, is that it's degraded. And you're going to see it's actually pretty pink on the screen here. So this is our video capture software. And you can see that we've got wires that run from the scanner right into the computer through the USB. So I'll just start record. So you can see this is a very loud machine. And you can see how pink the footage is. Sort of how much it's degraded from what would have been a pretty normal looking film. You know, we've got the hulk of ship here. That's really incredibly pink. It's really kind of gone on it. Now if I want to rewind it, I'll just flip it this way, and it just goes backwards. So this is what we were working on before, and for what it is, it does a terrific job. It's actually pretty simple to spool. There's actually a couple pieces of plastic. I can just cover this up with. It's easier to spool without the plastic, so we usually take it off, but that's part of why it's so loud. But the issue we have with this machine is that's the way it shoots, is it shows it exactly the way it is, which is sort of the big archival conundrum. We want to preserve the footage as it is, which is, it's degraded, it's turned pink on us. But for us to be able to license the footage and then use those funds to preserve the footage, our film contractor actually has to clean it up a little bit. Now, this is our new film scanner. It's from the Netherlands, the Film Fabriek Corporation. And what's really nice about this is it's all on the outside. It's much easier to see and to work with. Part of the really nifty thing about this one is there's actually a few options to clean the film. So these two green rotators right there, I'm not sure if you can quite see it, but they've gotten pretty dirty. And that's dust that's been actually pulled off the film. They're a little bit sticky. So that helps clean up the film footage as it's going through. Also, if we feel comfortable, we can use rollers and what's called a wet gate. So right here, we can put these two rollers, and then we would use this squirt bottle here. Basically, it's pure alcohol. And as the film goes through the rollers, it gets cleaned up. Then, in the amount of time it has to go from the wet gate all the way back up to this, where it spools back up, it has a little bit of time to air dry. That requires a lot of constant effort, though. You have to always be wetting it. So we, in practice, haven't been using it quite as much because it requires a little bit more focus. Now, what's really neat about this is unlike the other film scanner, which simply had one way to scan. We just put the film in and turned it on and went. There's a lot of customizable options for this scanner. First of all, it's a better machine. You'll notice even though the film is perforations, there's no specific spot where it actually touches the film. It's all run by a couple different spots. These two turn, and these two turn. Everything else just moves with the film. So it puts very little stress on the actual film, which is incredibly helpful for, it just doesn't break as much. I've got to say, one of the most frustrating things is when you've got 30 minutes of film and every couple moments it snaps because it's brittle and weak. The machine will stop, take it all off, take it over there, tape it back together, keep going, and then have it break on every couple minutes. It's frustrating. It slows it all down. So this is a lot easier on the film. Also, this camera can be taken off. So perhaps down the road, when we have different funds, we want to get a better camera, we can pop this right off and we can get a new one. So that's customizable. Also, this spot right here is set up to record sound. There's two types of sound. There's magnetic sound, and then there's actually, I think they call it ocular sound.
Optical.
Optical, thank you. Optical sound. So right now that's set up for magnetic. This is for optical sound. So the film goes through here, and you can actually see there's a little spot that will read the sound on the side, and I'll show you on the screen here. But this makes it a lot easier for us to switch out for both sound without putting any more stress on the film as it is. What's kind of nifty, and we'll see if you can see it, there's a little laser right here. That laser is lined up perfectly with the perforations, and as the film goes, it detects how many film cells there are, or how many frames, excuse me, are passing through. So it does all that just with that laser and counting the perforations, which is really neat. So, this is our fancy monitor setup right here. You can see with this cell right here that I've got on the screen, we're seeing the entire strip of film. What's really neat about some of the old news film we have is that this entire thing was actually film, and then they perforated it. So this spot right here, this I believe was, I found this earlier, it's the year 2000. It's a bit speculative about the future, and I just thought it looked really neat, so I thought I'd share this with you. This one was purpose made, so you can tell very obviously there's a frame. With some of our news film, they just got the film, they'd shoot it. You know, there's a quick turnaround in the news, so I think there wasn't as much care put towards it in that regard. So there's actually things on this side. There's a few footage where you're outside and you see a street, and there's a street here too. So for our purposes, it's really neat to get to capture the entire thing. It helps us see a little bit more of the historical record. The old scanner couldn't do that, but this one, because I can move the camera back and forth, I can capture this entire thing. Also, you'll see it as the film plays, this is the optical sound. So this is actually gonna move in and out, and it's very cool to watch. If this was magnetic, it'd just be black. You'd see that. Now, over here are some more complicated settings, which we can play with the color correction. So we can scan this both as it is, and we can actually clean it up a bit. With the pink footage I showed you over on the other scanner, I was able to actually get that pretty much back to normal. It's a little bit sepia, but it makes way more sense. And when you look at it, it makes sense to see a sepia colored ship instead of that like really pink one. So let me show you how this runs. So it's much quieter. The whole machine just runs a lot smoother. It's easier to see, but you can see how the optical sound moves in and out there. You can see there's still a little bit of marks on it. But this is basically what we end up doing. We set the film up, we scan it like this. We're scanning it at 24 frames per second. So there's a possibility we can scan it a smidge faster, that I could speed this up, because right now it's playing live as it would have played, just for scanning purposes, and then have the computer re-render it a little bit slower, because we have a lot of film to scan. But pretty much we can just set it, let it scan, and then store it. We've got some really terrific people in City IT who are helping us with storage, because this footage, you can't tell because of what the film is, but it's actually being shot in HD. So it'll really look terrific, and ideally that's not only so that the film looks as good as it possibly can, but that we never want to have to come back to it. So if it looks perfect, then going forward in 20 or 30 years, we'll have this film that'll look great, and we won't have to worry about rescanning it and bothering it. It can sit in the cold storage room around freezing. We won't have to bother the film further. So that really, in a nutshell, is what we do with the film collection. Were there any other questions on there? Okay, so one of the things I'd like to recommend is if you subscribe or follow us on Facebook, we periodically will post to YouTube and we'll post on Facebook as well when we do so, some of the footage that we have scanned. Certainly we're putting up some of the stuff we think is a little more interesting and remarkable for you to see, but we just do have a lot of really neat stuff here talking about daily life in Sacramento. So that's what we've got. Thanks a lot for watching. Feel free to post comments and questions. We'll take a look back at those and answer them as we can. And we'll go back there and see if we can find that prison tour footage for you as well.